When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Episode 122. It's the 29th of August. We're almost coming up to September now, and I hope you're getting your Christmas list because it's around the corner. Christmas is coming up fast, and if you want to know what to buy me, just send me an email. Well, let's introduce you to today's guest because he is someone who likes to ask 4 key questions as he seeks to build the life of his dreams. The questions are, how can I have more free time? Pretty good question. How can I make money doing what I love? Brilliant question. How can I travel the world pursuing my passions? And how can I run a real business from my laptop anywhere in the world? Now, they seem brilliant questions to ask yourself, I would have thought. And perhaps another question is, why do so many people not ask them very same questions themselves? But the journey to budding entrepreneur and smart and debonair businessman was not a usual one as we normally find on Join Up Dots. From developing a love of music and travelling from his dad, our guest first stepped into young adulthood as a wannabe Jon Bon Jovi, travelling around Europe and the States, playing his guitar in bars and getting up to God knows what in Amsterdam. But it was when he landed in Nashville, the home of country music, that the path to his unique and authentic self started becoming apparent. Along with his business partner, our budding Bon Jovi decided that they had 2 choices. 1, sign for a record company, or 2, build their own record company and retain control of their music, image rights and everything else that goes into making a band. They took the bold choice and so started a love of business that brings him onto the show today. So let's introduce to you and start joining up those dots, and of course to find out what did happen in Amsterdam, the one and only Mr. Jesse Krieger. How are you, sir?
Hey, David. Thanks for that great introduction. I'm excited to be here. And happy to be joining you in your backyard in the UK. I like that little intro bit.
Yeah, I am. I'm right at the back of the garden, and I'm just by the swing and the trampoline. I've got a little recording space that nobody bothers me, and it's the perfect place to have these kind of rocking and rolling conversations. You have got a life which I'm going to ask this first question. Where do you call home? Because you are somebody that literally wherever you lay your hat is your home. But do you have a base that you kind of go, yes, that's really where I sort of lay on the sofa in my PJs with my slippers on and nobody can get me?
Indeed, I do. San Francisco Bay Area is definitely my home. Right now, I specifically live in Berkeley, which is just over the bridge from San Francisco. But this area is always my home base and my springboard. That I both, bound off to far corners of the world and crawl back to after some crazy adventure.
And is that a place where I understand your mum and dad first moved to there and sort of said, and your mum and dad were travellers, they had seemed to have a freedom of spirit, but they landed in San Francisco and went, this is where we're going to raise our kids. Is that about true?
It's about true, except rather than landed, their honeymoon was, they're both from the East Coast. And when they got married, they got a van with a pop-up trailer and toured every national park in the United States. And so after they drove across the whole country, stopping at parks along the way, when they went through San Francisco, they're like, well, this place feels like home. And then long story short, they stopped the trip, sold the camper, and set up a life here. And next thing you know, I popped out.
I kind of love your mum and dad. I like that thought that your mum and dad, because so many sort of mums and dads kind of settle, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they have the house and dad goes off to work and mum does her thing, and then they sort of come back in the evening and they sit next to each other on the sofa and all that kind of stuff. Is your mum and dad still around, and have they still got that kind of freedom of spirit?
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely get a big influence for my travel from my dad. He's very adventurous and entrepreneurial. And growing up was a balance between that very sort of typical mom stays home and dad goes to the office and is home by dinner time, but only up to a point. And, sometime around 12 or 13, they split up. They were divorced very amicably, but lived in the same town. So we'd spend half of our time in one at the mom's and half our time at the others. And so whenever we went over to our dad's place, it was like, Freedom Central, go out, explore, go hang out with your friends on a school night. And then we went to mom's, and, bless her heart, she always meant well. She's like, you've got a curfew. You're going to sit here and do your homework on my watch. So I experienced the polarity and the pull really towards freedom and travel from a young age, having it contrasted.
So are you more like your dad than your mum?
No, I get an equal influence of both, but certainly the most visible attributes, entrepreneurship, love of traveling, off-road adventures, all these things. I definitely picked that stuff up from my dad.
Because I have certain guests that I am fascinated with, and I discuss their life, and it's all very interesting. But then I have certain guests that I kind of think, I'd actually kind of like that life. And yours is one of those ones that I look at and I think, this sounds good to me. It kind of plays to who I am deep down. I love the music. I love the traveling. I love those 4 questions that you ask, because one of my sort of starting points to my journey where I am now was the classic 4-Hour Workweek, which I'm looking up and I can see it on my bookshelf above me. And those 4 questions, how can I have more free time? How can I make money doing what I love? How can I travel the world? Blah, blah, blah. They're very Tim Ferriss-ish, aren't they? Was that something that you'd always had, or was it like me, a book or some discussion or something occurred to you that made you cement those 4 questions?
It's interesting. I mean, from a young age, from 19 years old, I was traveling around Europe and living on my own over there, playing music and being like sort of a lifestyle entrepreneur long before anybody put a title to it or a name came out. But I did discover the 4-Hour Workweek, many years later, like 5 or 6 years ago, and it was at the exact moment when I was exploring how could you do entrepreneurship that way, like totally supporting your lifestyle and able to run a business from anywhere. And the next business I built, which was a promotional USB flash drive business, I tried to set it up exactly like Tim Ferriss described. And for the large part, it worked out very well. So that book influenced me. I felt like a kindred spirit when I read it, because it was similar approaches that I've always taken in my own life, and gave me a bunch of new ideas as well.
Have you ever met Tim?
In passing, in fact, which is funny because he's, he calls San Francisco his home base as well. So I've always felt like it's imminent, but not to an intimate level at this point.
So when you started sort of like flexing your hustle muscle and stuff, because I'm looking at a picture of you now and you're wearing a very nice white shirt and you've got your hair all sort of combed back. You look like a businessman. And a lot of the pictures that I've seen of you, especially around sort of Asia and sort of Japan and places, you are playing the businessman role. But it seems to me your core element is the freedom and the musician and rocking out, because there are images as well of you going a little bit mad on stage with your hair going all over the place.
For sure.
Is that your key spirit? Are you kind of suppressing that, or have you kind of just moved on?
Hardly suppressing it. I think if anything, in the last few years, I've had this swung the other direction from being really extreme and outland. When I had my band and we were touring and stuff, I was wearing like leather jackets and tight pants and straightening my hair. And then I went through another phase of being like a professional dating coach. And I went to another extreme. I had like a mohawk and wore all sorts of crazy clothes. And now since the book came out and I'm doing more coaching and consulting, it's just a new iteration of my identity to be more professionally put together and at least and for public appearances. But I promise I still get down just as hard as I used to.
So what is the image that you kind of like most of all out of all those 3 that you were discussing?
Well, the honest thing is that I spend a lot of time thinking about, my identity and how I want to show up in the world and focus whatever I'm doing, both business-wise or lifestyle-wise, around that. So there's not so much one of the 3 that I like most, but there's different times and places when I can step fully into an identity or a role and exemplify that and really live it congruently. And then, hours later, I could be changed in a meeting. And I like the flexibility to be sort of like a chameleon. It's something I always thought of is like, how can you blend in and assimilate to a situation, take the most advantage of it, whether that means having fun and like rocking out or like being able to hold down a presentation to potential investors or business partners, and then how to switch all of them off and just relax and be, like a big kid. And I think the ability to do that level of flexibility and being attuned to how you show up and how you appear to other people is a skill that if you really get it, it's one step towards greater liberation and independence. So it's actually something I think and have written about quite a bit.
It's an amazing skill there, because I'm pretty much myself all the time. I'm just one-dimensional, really. I can change my my conversation and the style of interacting with people very, very quickly after a couple of words of, when we first go through on Skype and I say, how are you, and all that kind of stuff, within very short period of time, I kind of know what the vibe of the conversation is going to be, just because of the way the person sort of interacted with me. But actually, right, in the wider sense, going into a business meeting and then changing a little bit later, that's unusual, or is it unusual? Do you see lots of people doing like you do? Because it seems sensible. It seems sensible that you go into an environment and make the most of that environment by being what they expect you to be.
I'll give you a very, very explicit and I think funny example of this. When my book first came out in Southeast Asia in 2012, I went over there on a book tour for Lifestyle Entrepreneur. And when we were touring around these, we're driving through the countryside of Malaysia and Singapore and all these places. And I'd just be in shirt and sweatpants in the car as we're driving. And then we'd show up at a big book fair, right? And in the parking lot, I'd change into my suit jacket and tuck in my trousers and put on a nice pair of shoes. And then we'd walk in. And in the span of 10 minutes, I went from wearing a gym outfit basically to walking in and standing on a stage with, a poster of me and my book behind and an audience, and being able to fully embody that and enjoy the experience. And then being able to switch right back. It doesn't feel like I'm being another person. It's just a different, putting forth a different side of myself and giving an authentic experience of what people are expecting to see.
Do you class yourself as an actor or a presenter?
I think that I'm not 100% up on this, but there's these, different types of entrepreneurship. Like some people are a mechanic, some like to work behind the scenes and set up systems. Some are a star and they're really out front and they're the face of their brand. I've always identified with being, I've always enjoyed both the pressure of, putting yourself in the public eye and being a public face and voice, with the more quiet side of systems and analysis and behind the scenes work. So I think I step between the two, and it's a healthy challenge for myself. And it's also rewarding to be able to see. In the music business, you'd call sit on both sides of the glass, right?
Yeah.
You can go out and perform and record a track, or you can come in the back room and adjust the sound and mix it and make it into a finished record. So I always like being on both sides of the glass. And it's like we were talking about, before we started recording, David, of, in any given time in a day, I could be hosting somebody on for Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Academy, or then show up and be a guest, and it's just stepping into different roles for different purposes. And I try to play that forward into having a complete identity with a business that augments an interest that you have in life, whether that's studying a language and a culture or geography, so fitting in travel as part of a schedule, or making more time to, be around the house with the family. Whatever those objectives are, creating a cohesive identity around it that you can step in and out of as needed to perform the tasks required to hit those goals, whether it's income goals, travel goals, learning goals, relaxation time goals. I try and be pretty strategic with where I really invest my time and energy.
I love that. I totally love that, because I understand that. I kind of relate myself in a very loose way to Batman. I know that's going to sound stupid, but
no.
I kind of like with Batman that he's Bruce Wayne and he's just himself, and he spends half his time in bed being looked after by his butler, and then suddenly he's called on and he becomes this thing. And I find that's my kind of persona. I like to be invisible. I don't like to be out in the front. But then now doing this, as soon as I go record, bang, I'm up and I'm ready and I'm doing it and I'm trying to do the best job I possibly can. But then once I stop recording, I then disappear and I become Bruce Wayne again. And so I can, I can totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and you go behind the scenes and you edit the podcast and get it ready. And there's the thing I learned from starting in the entertainment business and moving to others and now back to sort of being a persona as an author and a speaker and a trainer is the interesting aspect of the front side and back end of a business where you step out and sort of become that superhero, become a persona or a personality. And how a lot of to be able to turn that on and off, I think is it's fun, as you mentioned. And it's also a great skill to be able to just jump into character and deliver fully and then step back and objectively critique yourself or make improvements or edit out certain areas or parts. I'm talking as much about, recordings I'll do for a training material or writing a book as it may be for you for a podcast or other people for a broadcast material.
Yeah.
And I think it is fun. I like your superhero analogy. I mean, the way I feel is sometimes it's like potential versus kinetic energy. It's like when I'm home in my home base, sometimes I like to not even drive day to day. I live in a place where I can walk or jog everywhere I need to go. And then I switch gears, and then all of a sudden I'm on planes and trains and bouncing around and in a different city every couple of days when I'm traveling. And those two polarities is the similar experience of perhaps you donning the Batman cape and hitting record. It's like when I'm home, I'm working on something or planning a new project or pushing forward on a business. Then I switch gears, and it's much more about experiencing the world and traveling and meeting people and having in-person meetings. It's a fun balance.
Well, I think you've got the balance right. And is it something that's always been there, that balance, or has it been part of your joining up the dots, your connection, your journey through?
No, it's always a work in progress. And at most, I find that I can get it right for 6 months at a time or so, where I've optimized living situation and work situation and got everything pretty well set up. But then maybe it's a function of getting bored easily or restless or becoming interested in different things so often that I used to move around, every 3 months I'd move to a different place. Then for a while, I just put all my stuff in storage and travel for 3 months. And I did this year after year for the last 5 or 6 years. But now I'm enjoying being a little more grounded and actually a little more focused and business-minded. And maybe that's just a function of getting older or growing up, or who knows? Maybe I'll fly off the deep end and do an around-the-world journey and turn off all my electronic devices. The future is yet to be written.
Absolutely, and you create your own future, and that's the beauty of doing what you're doing. So what actually is a lifestyle entrepreneur? For people out there that's hearing you say that, the name of your book, just explain to them what that actually means.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking around it. If you picked it up between the lines as you're hearing us share our experiences here, but my definition of being a lifestyle entrepreneur, it's somebody that really intentionally explores the things they're interested in and passionate about in creative and engaging ways, both through the filter of having a business, so providing some value to the market in an industry that you're interested in or have some relative level of skill or expertise, but also having that business be two intertwined strands of DNA supporting your lifestyle and empowering it, having it be the common thread that takes you from place to place or experience to experience. Stepping in and out of that business persona and embodying and enjoying the lifestyle that you want to create around it.
So it's lifestyle design, is it?
Yeah, plus entrepreneurship. And that's actually the original working title, was Lifestyle Design plus Entrepreneurship, but it wasn't very catchy. And so it ended up becoming, to be a lifestyle entrepreneur is to do that. And that can be, 2 to 3 different projects at any given point in time. Some of them fall away, some of them take precedence, and you focus more energy on them, but constantly systematically introducing variety, both in experience and geographic location, and also industry-specific knowledge. over a course of a few years of doing that, it's great how you get this like broad and ever expanding awareness of, how world events unfold, how countries interact, as well as how business and trade takes place. Since so much of, we're moving more and more into a digital world, and everything I'm talking about for lifestyle entrepreneur is predicated on doing business through the internet, mediated in some way through the internet. So it starts to erase, boundaries. You're 6,000 miles away from where I am now, but we're able to have a great conversation and collaborate. And 2 hours from now, we could each be talking to somebody else in another country. So the internet makes that possible. And if your business is run in a way that it can be managed anywhere, then it matters much less than ever before where you are or where I may be at any given point in time. In fact, it's almost irrelevant. As long as I'm able to show up and contribute and do what needs to be done, it's an afterthought of where I actually am in the world.
Well, that's the key thing, isn't it?
It is.
I don't want to stop you there, but it is madness nowadays that these companies pay all this office space and all these rental charges and all those kind of things, where you could, as I say, Tim Ferriss's book kind of changed my life. And I remember I get into page 44 and thinking, my God, why am I going to this office 9 to 5 when effectively I could sit anywhere I want, log on and do my work? Why am I doing this? And why am I doing it at sort of 9 till 5 when I could be doing it at 3 o'clock in the morning, and all that kind of stuff? And I always say to my colleagues, if I ever get a company going, there's going to be two criterias. One, we meet up once a week or once a month or somewhere in a pub. And the other thing is that you just go and do your work. And if you come back to me and you say, I haven't had chance to do it, then you're sacked. But if you go off, and I don't care if you're on the top of a mountain, you just do the work, task-based. And I really believe, maybe it's a naive view, but that's the way that companies should operate nowadays, to provide flexibility for the staff, which then will give loyalty back and keep profits down.
I agree with you. And I'm happy to report that I think some of the smartest, most innovative companies are doing that. One accessible example is Google requires everybody to spend 1 day a week working on some totally unrelated project to whatever they were hired for. It's total free time, 20% of your work week. And what comes out of that is the next wave of innovations that they get. Other companies take the approach you just described and said, it doesn't matter where you are, work from home, work from your car, it doesn't matter, but it's task-based, results-based. And that's in the company's best interest as well. And so, it's one thing to try and adapt to this new and ever-growing opportunity online if you're an existing, company that has brick and mortar stores or an operating history. One thing to adapt, but it's another to have that be the foundation on which you start something new and be able to plan around it in much the same way. Build your processes from the ground up to factor in that it shouldn't matter where anybody is. In fact, to take advantage of the different pricing and skill sets, and I think Tim Ferriss calls it geographic arbitrage, but I just think working with people in different time zones, if I assign some graphics jobs to a team that I'm working with in Pakistan, I'm going to bed, their workday is just starting. I get up the next day and the first round of design work is done, and the first thing that I can review right away. So it actually makes the operations almost 24/7. If you have different teams in different parts of the world, that I actually look at the world as in any 24 hours, there's 3 different shifts, 8 hours each, right? There's like the U.S. from Hawaii to New York, and then there's Europe and Middle East, and then there's Asia. And so you could actually get really intentional and set up customer service in one region and a sales function in another one in such a way that it's strung together through technology, but it's effectively a 24/7 operation with real people and support available at any given time of the day. So that's the expansive view of what's possible. You could market to, sell to, and support customers in any part of the world, no matter where you are as well. So it's not just about personal freedom and the ability to travel as much as it is looking at the world as a potential market and a playground, so to speak.
Well, I like the view, and no, I don't even like the view. I love that view, and I think everyone should do that. You know, when my kids grow up, two of my younger ones, I don't want them going like I did to an office every day, sitting underneath a fluorescent light, just trying to get to lunchtime. I want them to, you know, be given a job, and if they sit there and they work really hard at it, and they get it done in 4 hours, then take the rest of the day off. You know, I think that's the way forward, and you'd have that focus on the task, and you're not just justifying your time in that office because you've got to stay there till 5 o'clock. So you have a chat with the person next to you, and you go off for a coffee, and you add an extra 15 minutes on your lunch, and all those kind of things that spread the day. It's got to be task based.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're preaching to the choir here because I'm on board. I'm all for it. But what happens when you think of things task based is then there's a built-in drive towards efficiency, because you say, okay, if I've got to get this done, if I've got to write a new let's say I have to create a new sales letter for a product that I'm doing, I say, if I've committed to doing that today, and that's the main thing I'm going to do today, then how quick can I get it done? Or what's the most effective way to accomplish that? It's such a different mindset because it's totally solutions oriented and productivity focused. If your motivation is high to complete the task and then go do something else that would be more fun, then you'll find creative ways to make it happen.
Parkinsons Law. I was trying to think what it was called. Parkinsons Law is the most brilliant law known to man. I'm assume you know all about Parkinsons Law.
Is it the Pareto principle, the 80-20?
No, it's the bit that a task will always expand into the amount of time you give it. So it's like when you come home from school and you got homework and you got 6 weeks to do it, and it takes all of that 6 weeks because you got that time, where actually if you just crack on with it, you can get it done in sort of like half hour and have the rest of the 6 weeks off.
It's so funny how that's so true, for one. I think Parkinson's Law is the task will expand to the amount of time allotted for it. So if you got a week to write a paper, then most people aren't going to really put the finishing touches on it until that final day, maybe even the last couple hours. But you observe this. This is part of the human experience. So how does it work in business? I mean, if you've ever done a launch or seen a product launch online, where there'll be like, the availability is 4 days, right? The shopping cart is open for 4 days to register for this program or a seminar or whatever. In most cases, 40 to 50% of the sales will take place hours before the cart closes. So in business, right, instead of in like a school context where it's like you have a due date for a paper, in business, if you have a limited time offer or some real scarcity in your offer, whether it's a product discount or package for services that you offer, if you give a limited time, you'll observe that some people who are already ready to go will take you up on it right away, maybe 25, 30%. And then some sales will come in intermittently over the coming days that the cart is open. But then most people will put off their actual decision until the last couple hours or even minutes when there's a real cost, meaning they won't have the chance to buy or participate in this program anymore after a certain date and time. So it's fascinating how these analogs of human behavior appear throughout the different aspects of business and life. Or I've always thought so.
Do you know, I can't imagine you being a rocker. When listening to you, talking like you are, it seems like a fantasy world, but you really used to hang around Nashville. And what was it like in Amsterdam? Because I've been to Amsterdam, and it's a madhouse, isn't it? So you lived there for a while.
I've been to Amsterdam quite a few times. I lived in Vienna, Austria, and London on a few occasions. I spent a lot of time in Europe. I mean, Amsterdam's a really fun city for many reasons.
Yes, and it's a family show.
Yeah, it just depends what district you're in. If you want the museums or if you want the red light, you have a whole different world of experience. Or rent a bike and go check out the sheep and windmills in the countryside. That's what I always love to do there.
Come on, you didn't just do that, did you?
I don't know. Is this a G-rated broadcast, or can we get into the real nitty-gritty?
I think you've said enough, young man. I think we know what went there. Your silence said everything. So getting to Nashville, okay, the home of country music, was that the real, as we called in this show, the big dot, where your life kind of really came together and your true authentic path really became visible? Was Nashville where it all came together for you?
I would agree. I think that's insightful, given what you know about my background. I mean, before I moved to Nashville, just a quick recap, I was in Los Angeles Music Academy. I was playing in bands in LA. There you have to pay money to play at a club. So I was like, this isn't going to work. And traveling around Europe, recording, meeting other musicians, it was all good and fun. But it wasn't until Nashville when I got a studio on Music Row. There's these two streets, Music Row East and West. It's where all the record labels and publishing houses are. So we got a house there, me and my bandmate, an eventual business partner, and just started doing it, full time, 14 hours a day. We'd be writing, recording, working with other artists, playing out, and really at a point in time, we saw that there was sort of a fork in the road, and you could either sign with a record label and like get an agent and go down that route, which was appealing. A lot of people were trying to get a record deal, especially back in 2003, 4, and 5, sort of a different time in the music business. But I saw that meant giving away creative control, basically working for somebody else's dream, the record label owner, etc. I saw the other path that you could go was if we started our own record label. So became, business people in a sense, and signed our own band to our label and had more responsibility, yes, but also true authorship of our experience and creative control for the music that we put out. So in terms of the big dot, things coming together, that was definitely it. It was by starting that record label, and I volunteered to do all the business stuff because my bandmate was extremely creative, but didn't really want to get involved in the business stuff, and I don't blame him. But I was hot on the idea, so I said, "Look, I'll run it effectively." And that was when I started to really get the entrepreneurship bug. We formed a team of advisors, raised about $125,000, and then were able to hire the producer to do our album. So he worked for us instead of a label assigning him to you. Hired a manager to manage our career, hired booking agents and radio promoters, etc., and just oversaw the execution and release of our album, and then got to enjoy the benefits from touring around and getting the real experience of being in a band sort of on our own terms.
And you had a number one, didn't you?
Yeah, so after all that work, and it was definitely a lot of work the first time around, figuring out not only learning business in general, but how to do our specific, music business. It did end up paying off. We had music on over 300 radio stations. 9 of our 11 songs were on MTV, on different shows and movies, etc. And ultimately, in August 2005, we had the number 1 independent rock song in the U.S., which our band was called Harsh Krieger, my last name and my bandmate's last name. And the song was called Home. I mean, if you did a search for Harsh Krieger home video, you'd see our music video. It's still online and still getting plays today.
Does it excite you looking back at it, or does it sort of embarrass you slightly?
Not that one. I'm not embarrassed by it. In fact, the brilliant thing about the internet and doing business, like having things that are released into the world and available online, is that there's even a record now of all of the music and the videos and the articles that came out about us. This is like 10 years ago. So it's never more than a few clicks away. The downside is, of course, if stuff gets out there and it's not 100% congruent with the image you want and how you want to be perceived, then, I'd start with cleaning up your online presence. But the collection of stuff you'd find if you just did a search for my name, I think is a credit to the different projects and businesses I've been involved in. So yeah, I'm happy about it.
Because how old are you, Jesse?
I'm 32.
Because you're 32. Because I realise I'm 44 years old and I'm a very attractive man. I'll be honest with you, okay? But there has been times when I've had some rather bizarre haircuts, particularly in the 80s when I was first going to work and stuff, as we all did. But I was talking to my mate the other day and I was saying the beauty about our fashion crimes of that time was nobody had a phone, so therefore no one had a camera. And so nowadays, you only have to look slightly bad and it's on Facebook and it's there forever and a day. But in my days, you could get away with that. So what you're saying about the online world, you've got to clean up with it. That's a big problem nowadays, isn't it? Which I never had when I was younger.
It can be. Well, you have I'd pull out a Nashville saying for you. You had a face made for radio, huh?
Yes.
One of the...
Yeah.
That was what people used to say, when you had those crazy haircuts in Nashville or wearing a full cowboy getup at a bar.
Have you been into Tootsie's bar, the Orchid Bar?
Yes, of course.
That's my favorite bar of all time. Anyone wants a drink, just get on a plane and go over to there. It's the most brilliant bar. I've had the worst hangovers I think I've ever had in Tootsie's, but it's just a powerhouse, isn't it? The music is brilliant. The atmosphere in there, it's a real proper bar.
It is. It's one of those historic, iconic places like the Grand Ole Opry or, if you do make it out to Nashville, definitely go check out some of that. It is truly Music City. So I haven't been back in long enough, but I still remember Tootsie's. But, to your point, David, about online presence and cleaning all that stuff up, I mean, if you're really getting serious about doing business online and putting yourself out there as a public figure or having a broadcast or a podcast or a blog, it's useful to see what's already out there and doing a search for yourself. A year and a half ago, I really got serious about that, and now totally am in control of what you'd see when you search for my name. And I don't know, I think if you're in a job or a situation where it could damage you, if stuff got put online rather than just embarrass you, then it's not the biggest deal. If you run your own business and you don't have to appear a certain way, that's one of the great freedoms of entrepreneurship. Is I'm not really concerned if I'm out in Vegas and there's a picture of me taking a huge drink out of a vodka bottle. I'm not going to get fired for it unless I fire myself. So I think it's just a sliding scale of how sensitive or aware you are about how people perceive you online, and then adjusting accordingly.
Yeah, if you type in David Ralph, the number one name on Google that comes up is a doctor of male impotence. And
is that one of your former businesses, or is that just totally unrelated?
It's totally unrelated unless the wife's been talking. But it's if you type in David Ralph, that's the name that comes up. It's uncanny, really, that I'm sort of vaguely connected in that way. As you were saying that, I was typing in my name, which I don't normally do, to see what is out there about me. But is it a big problem nowadays then with people? Do they kind of set their online branding up in the wrong way without cleaning everything up?
Well, I look at it a couple ways, David. I think, a lot of what I talk about in Lifestyle Entrepreneur and the kind of way that I'll coach people through business is making that choice on whether you want to be the face and the voice for your brand, if it's a personality-based brand, like a blog or a podcast, or even being in performance, like music or dance, where you are effectively the product in some shape or form, or whether you want a business that's totally arm's length, systems-based, and where your identity doesn't even have to be involved. And just to know that there's a possibility of selling products into a market that already exists and running a business that provides value and generates an income, you don't have to have your name on the website anywhere. And that gives you a certain degree of flexibility, because even if you own it and you're the only person that runs the business at the outset, you can bounce between roles and respond to one person as a customer support representative, Jesse, and then if I'm working on a partnership with somebody else, I'll write them as, founder and CEO. So you can have flexibility and disassociation from your personal brand, no matter what's up about you online, or maybe there's nothing. So that's nice in terms of flexibility to move between different roles and But if you are going after the former, like being an author or something, then you want all of the information that's available to reference back to you in the current role and title and everything that's associated with the project you're involved in. So, for example, when I was getting ready to release the book, I made sure that everything online was referencing me as, Jesse Krieger, author of Lifestyle Entrepreneur, and started to just mitigate the stuff that was out there about previous projects or something else that I'd done, so that it stays current.
How do you do that? How do you sort of go back and change stuff? I thought that once it's on the internet, that's it. You can't do anything about it at all.
Well, if you own the sites, right? If I had I could simply take a site down. If I had a business or something that I didn't want to run anymore, if something's within your control. But if it's out there, I don't know, if there's articles that have been written and other things and so forth, over time they may lose popularity on their own, or the best strategy is always just to create more new stuff that's relevant and current, and be in control of what's next and what's coming out now, because even search engines have adapted, and this is a good thing, to focus more on like what's popular, current. If somebody's publishing consistently, then they'll get boosted in rankings. So if you just start acting, publishing, putting stuff out there in the new role and format that you want to be experienced in, then quickly the search results will reflect that. So it's not something you really need to worry about too much, fortunately.
So my history in Amsterdam can be suppressed and nobody will know about it.
Nobody will know unless they dig very deep or hire a private investigator.
or just get me drunk in a Nashville bar and then ask me the question.
See, there you go. You can spend all this time fixing up your image online, and then a couple shots of whiskey reveals all.
I'm a loser. I'm gone. I promise you. Well, what I want to do at this point, Jesse, is part of the show is we played a speech from Steve Jobs about connecting up the dots. I'm fascinated with your journey because it does seem to be that there are key dots and big dots that have linked it up, all the way really from your dad's freedom of spirit and his love of music, all the way through to where we are now. So I'm going to play the words of Steve Jobs, and then I want to sort of ask whether you actually think it is relevant to your life and whether you think there are points to it that really do focus in on your own personal journey. So this is Steve Jobs.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college. But it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
So do you know what he's saying? Do you buy into those words?
Oh, well, you certainly quoted the right person. I mean, I've loved Steve Jobs since before I could even talk. So I've followed his whole career from long before, the 2000s. And that speech is one of his best. And honestly, it resonates very deeply because it was exactly my experience. It was one of the reasons that I decided to even write a book. Was I was thinking through what is the common thread that connected so many disparate interests, so many unrelated pursuits and businesses and lifestyle changes. And then sure enough, looking backwards, you can connect the dots and see, oh, well, here's the turning point where I started to transition from, let's say, being in the music business that ultimately led me towards consulting and wound up in investment banking. At the time, you're just like, whoa, what is it? Look, in that space, looking forward, you don't know how it's going to turn out. But in hindsight, of course, it becomes much more clear. So I love that quote. I'm glad that it's a part of your show.
It's one of those speeches that I think, I would love to go back in time to know whether he realized he was creating something so powerful and life-affirming and true for so many people, or whether he was like, oh, blimey, I've got to do that speech in 20 minutes. Oh, and what shall I say? And just sort of scribbled a few things down. I would love to know how long it took him to actually write that.
I think he is meticulous, and maybe one of the underappreciated things about Steve Jobs was like how long ahead of time they'd start planning for their new product announcements and launches. They'd rehearse for months, and he'd be maniacal about the light hitting the computer he was unveiling at just the right angle so that it reflected, like really detail oriented. So I imagine he put some time into it.
Is there any kind of Steve Jobs traits that you can see in yourself? Are you meticulous? Are you kind of that focused?
Well, if I was to draw an analogy, of course, it's big shoes to fill, but I really love design, and both product design, experience design, graphic design. I'm not a designer myself, but I try and be pretty meticulous about, the way that websites I put out are, how they're formatted and how they look and how you experience them. Try and be pretty meticulous about videos or training materials that I put out, and really like deliver a great, well-designed experience. So I think if anything, I take away that appreciation for design and usability.
Well, where is your life going to go then now, Jesse? You seem to have got it, to my way of thinking, pretty much nailed. You've got a business that you can take anywhere on earth. You've got a best-selling book. You can write a good tune every now and again. Where are you? Where's your aims now with everything that you've got going on?
It's a great question. And, I spend a decent amount of time wondering the same thing myself. But in all honesty, it's a constant challenge to, one up your own experience and push the boundaries further and farther. So right now I'm looking out from, where I stand today. Of course, I may connect the dots differently looking back in 3 years, but I'm really hot on publishing right now. And in fact, we just launched our first book through Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press, which is an offshoot publishing label that I have to help other people that have interesting life stories and business and entrepreneurial experience, take them from, a rough manuscript through to a polished, great finished product with good design and presentation, and helping them market and build a business on the back end of it. So my goal is to release a total of 10 books through Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press over the next 2 years. And so including mine and this one that just came out on Airbnb called Get Paid for Your Pad. Then we've got 8 more to go to hit that goal.
That rings a bell to me. I spoke to a gentleman the other day. Bear with me. I'll look him up. This has shocked me.
I know his name.
Oh, do you know his name, do you?
Jasper Ribbers.
No, it wasn't. It was...
Uh-oh.
It was...
Huzefa Kapadia.
That's him. That's him. I had him on the show. He's going to be episode 87. And he requested to be on the show. And he spoke about writing this book. I've just joined up the dots in my own life. This is uncanny. So
so I've been working with him for months, him and Jasper, the other co-author. And literally, it's even funnier. That's who I was interviewing this morning, to announce their book launch. And Jasper, his co-author, Huzefa's co-author, is actually featured in my book, Lifestyle Entrepreneur. So that's why I thought that name might have sounded familiar.
That's quite uncanny. It really is. And I remember he was saying how he realised that now he's written that book, and it was something that he had to almost take a leap of faith and courage, because he never really thought that he could write one. It's his now passion. He wants to write more and more books. Oh, yeah.
Writing is so fun in that way. I mean, it's been one of the most rewarding things for me to become an author, truly. And I'm grateful for it every time I'm able to, sign a book for somebody, or in the intro and conclusion to my book, I give my email address and I invite people to write me and share what their experience was reading it. Those letters, honestly, is more rewarding than the money I make from the book itself. And so that experience is something I'm actively coaching other people through and helping them get books and get them out to the world, and have the books be a feeder for something else. So Huzefa and Jasper, behind their book, Get Paid for Your Pad on Airbnb, There's a whole training academy to optimize your listing and increase the value of your apartment or house on Airbnb, and just like a whole set of resources that builds off of the stories and the strategies in the book, which is the same approach I take with lifestyle entrepreneur. It just the business model really is allowing people to go as deep with the experience as they want to go. If someone just wants to read a book and implement or be entertained and educated, great. And if you want to actually get serious and start a business, then we've got, an audio training program, a weekend business launch boot camp. I do one-on-one coaching with people, and that becomes a book-based business, and that's what we're focusing on. That's my big focus over the next coming years through the Lifestyle Entrepreneur brand.
Did you feel like an older brother to these guys?
A little bit. Some of them actually some of the people that I work with say I'm like a big brother. It's kind of funny that is kind of the vibe I like to give out. It's like someone that really cares, is looking out for your best interest, but is also not afraid to, rough you up a bit and push you to do better and do more. So sometimes, yeah, without sounding paternalistic, I do like that. Yeah, I get that. I get that sometimes.
And who roughs you up? Who pushes you? Or are you just driven? Do you have a mentor or a coach?
That's a good question. Some of my friends, my peers, are just doing some amazing things in business right now. And even if they're not like pushing me directly, like, hey, look what I did, last month, I see it, and we're friends and we talk about it. And that inspires me to be like, holy cow, like, I can play in a bigger game. I can push myself further. And then, aside from that, my core group of friends and my family are never afraid to to tell me what's really on their mind.
So here's a question, just before I put you on the Sermon on the Mic and we send you back in time to have a one-on-one with your younger self. But I have got a magic wand in my hand. And if I wave it at you, you can either become Richard Branson or Bruce Springsteen. Which one would you become?
Richard Branson, no question about it.
So the sort of music part of your life is definitely second place to the business side now.
Let me push back on that. So Richard Branson, the quintessential lifestyle entrepreneur, by the way, his first venture, as well as my first venture, was a record label. And he did much more with Virgin Records than I did with Harsh Krieger and our Tabula Rasa records. But then he went on to do a variety of businesses in all sorts of different fields. So I feel like if I had a big brother, I'd want him to be Richard Branson. If you could wave a wand, I'd probably still be myself, but I wouldn't mind trying out Richard Branson for a few days.
Yeah, but you've done better than him. He hasn't been on my show.
Zing.
Yeah. Back at you, Branson. We've got one up on you.
Finally, some leverage.
Absolutely. Right, okay, so let's take you to the very end of the show. And as I was saying, this is the part that we call the Sermon on the Mic. And this is when I play my tune. And as it's playing, it will transport you back in time to have a one-on-one with your younger self. And if you did go into a room and you met the younger Jesse, what age would you choose? Would it be the 5-year-old Jesse? Would it be the 20-year-old, the one in Amsterdam? Or could it just be a couple of weeks ago? So I'm going to play this, and you're up. This is the Sermon on the Mic.
Here we go with the best bit of the show, the Sermon on the Mic, the Sermon on the Mic.
Well, I'm talking to myself, Jesse, at 18 years old, just finishing high school, getting ready to step out into the world and move to Los Angeles to pursue his dream in music. And you know what I'd tell him is don't worry about it too much. It'll all fall into place as long as you stay focused on what you're really passionate about and keep that at the forefront of your mind, especially when things get difficult, when obstacles pop up, and when it looks like you're hitting a brick wall. There's always some other way, some other window opens when every door closes. And I'd say, look, don't afraid to be bold. I mean, you're not doing yourself any favors by playing small, and nobody's giving you extra credit for just playing in a small game. this is the time. It's always the time, but especially at this time, 18, stepping out into the world as a young man, to really try and push as hard as you can to accomplish what your dream is. And it's when I think back and think about from 18 through 21, 22, I felt like there was such a weight on my shoulder. So I'd encourage my younger self to not feel like you have to prove yourself to other people. Instead, try and be one step better than the highest vision you have for what you're capable of doing. And if you can take one step beyond your comfort zone each day, then just one step beyond your comfort zone each day, over the course of months, of a year, you end up miles beyond where you thought you could go. And if you try and sprint and do it all at once, then you just burn out and be frustrated. But if you consistently chip away at it, then inevitably you'll start to see the results and experience the success that you want so much. And so with that said, I tell my younger self to get off the couch and get out there and make it happen.
I don't think that's just great advice for your younger self. That's great advice for me. That's great advice for all our listeners, because there is that kind of that vibe that success comes overnight, and it doesn't, does it?
No. In Nashville, we'd say overnight success, 7 years in the making.
Yeah, absolutely. But all this sort of Justin Bieber's.
But you do reach a tipping point. You do reach a tipping point where it does seem, for of all external appearances, holy cow, he just appeared out of nowhere, and now he's huge. But that's never the whole story, is it?
It never is. It never is. Even with us rocking and rolling like we are in the online environment, it's hard slog, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, well, you got to pay your dues in any field, any business, any undertaking. You got to get acclimatized to what it really is going to take to make it happen. And once you can see that, then you get the sobriety and be like, okay, am I really willing to give what it really takes instead of what you think or your preconceptions before you're on the field. Such a difference between living your life on the field, taking hits and making advances, than it is to be a spectator and sit in the stands and narrate and critique what other people are doing. Once you're on the field, then it's all about getting the right playbook and getting the right strategies and people that believe in you and staying focused on your goals. But that's where the action is, and that's when you really experience, what it's like to get sideswiped or have your legs knocked out from under you. Speaking metaphorically now, but the business analogy is, you make a bad decision and you lose money, or you piss somebody off, or some real tangible harm can come. But it's not enough to take you out of the game as long as you have a backup plan and you get back up and keep charging.
Jesse, I've loved talking to you tonight, and I'm sure our listeners who have been fascinated with your story and your passion and your successes would like to connect with you. So what is the best way to connect with you?
Well, thanks so much for the opportunity to come on and talk about such meaningful topics here, David. And for everybody that's listening and for yourself, feel free to drop me a line at Jesse, Jesse, at jessekrieger.com. And it's KRIEGER.com. And if for any listeners to join up dots, if you pick up a copy of my book, Lifestyle Entrepreneur, just forward me the receipt and I'll send you either the full audiobook or 10 hours of interviews with other very successful lifestyle entrepreneurs. And I've got about 10 hours of videos and 150 pages of transcripts from a recent summit that I ran. So I'd be happy to give those to anybody here as a bonus.
That is amazingly generous. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, joining up those dots of your life. And please come back again when you have more dots to join up, because Jesse, I believe that by joining up those dots and connecting our past is the best way to build our futures. Jesse Krieger, thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice that every successful entrepreneur practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.